Hello and welcome to the final day of the year. This is the big video. Out of all the books that I've read this year, I've whittled down 100 to my top 10 favourite books to share with you. Bear in mind that a lot of my books are at university, so I haven't got physical copies to show you, so hopefully my tech skills will be enough that I can insert a picture of one here. The first book that I want to share is one of the first ones that I read. I definitely read it in January or February, and it is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak, which is a book that has had such an emotional effect on me. Sometimes even thinking about that book makes me emotional, and it's one of the few books that I think I would recommend to absolutely anyone. It takes place in a small town in Germany during the Second World War, and it's about a girl who stays with her foster family, and she develops this love for reading, and she has this empathy towards a Jewish man that they actually hide in their basement. And it's such a heartbreaking story, but it's a book about books, and I think that's why I was especially drawn to it. It was a book that had been on my list for years, so I'm really glad that I read it for the first time this year, and I actually have gone back to it and read certain parts again because I just think about it all the time and I talk about it all the time, and I really recommend it. The next book on my list was one that I was really excited about reading, and it's Stardust by Neil Gaiman. It's my first Neil Gaiman book, although I have watched some of his show Good Omens, which I really love, so that did make me want to read this more. But Stardust is actually one of my favourite movies from my childhood. A lot of people will probably have seen the film, but before you go into this book you should know that it's very different. This is a book for adults. You can tell that pretty soon in the story, and it's still got that whimsical feel to it. It's not quite as lovely and fairy tale-ish. Some of it is actually quite dark. But for a very short book, it has a really good plot, and I read it in one sitting. I read it so quickly, and I definitely see why so many people recommended it to me. The cover of this one is beautiful, by the way. I got this from an indie store who had these ones because it was so pretty. But it's got these amazing characters. It's a bit darker than the film, but in such a good way. I think a lot of people that love the film growing up will love the book too. Neil Gaiman has this way of writing that's quite straightforward, but still takes you to this other world so easily, and I think a lot of people would enjoy this one. The next book, I wish I had my physical copy to show you, but I lend it out so much that I don't have it right now, is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. And it's quite a short book again. I read it really quickly. It's about 250 pages, but I can't tell you too much about this one because I honestly think that people should go in completely blind, because it has some amazing twists, and it's not at all what you'd think looking at the cover or looking at the blurb. Everyone that I've lent it to has also absolutely loved it. It's whimsical, dreamy. It's about a man who lives in this giant classical style house, and he thinks he's the only one there bar this one other person, and he's forgotten who he is. He's finding these mysterious notes, and slowly it unravels in the best way. And if you like fantasy or the idea of fantasy but you don't read much, it is such a great place to start. My Nana never reads fantasy, but she absolutely loved this book, and she loved the twists, and I just think it's such a good kind of genre-bending book. The next book on my list is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn, and this was one of my favourite fantasy books of the year. It is something that a lot of people are intimidated by because of the text size, apparently, but I remember reading it really quickly, so if that's a problem for you, don't let it stop you from reading this book. It's the first in a series. The new book is coming out quite soon. The cover is gorgeous, and the story is so great. It's dark academia. It's a mix of culture and different magic systems, Arthurian legend, and it has probably one of my favourite main characters in a fantasy book in quite a long time. I like both of the love interests, I think, although my opinions changed towards the end of the book. It is a book that means a lot to a lot of people. I know so many people on Book Talk absolutely love this one, and I 100% see why. I've been thinking about the sequel non-stop since I read it. I definitely want to read it again before the new one comes out, just because I had such a good time reading it. It's not too long, I don't think, for the first book in a series, but yeah, especially the twist at the end. I can't tell you anything about it, but the twist at the end I really enjoyed. The next book on my list I listened to as an audiobook a couple of months ago, and it is Lily and the Octopus by Stephen Rowley. And this book was so good as an audiobook. The narrator was amazing, and it got me out of a reading slump that I started when I was at university. It kind of reminded me that reading books is such a good way to feel at home and to enjoy just being with myself in my own time and listening to something. It is about a man and his dog Lily, who is a dachshund, very cute, and she has an octopus, which is a tumour, but he struggles to say that, so he uses this metaphor throughout the book. And it's a mix of a kind of story of Lily's life with flashbacks and current problems, with the addition of magical realism. The octopus kind of comes to life in a way, and it's a really sweet story. It does get emotional at times, but it's just such a feel-good book as well, and I really enjoyed that one. I don't read much sci-fi, but the next book, Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, I really loved, and I love spotting all the 80s references, the movies, the music, the games. I love anything set with kind of gaming. I don't game very much myself, but I think it's such a cool concept for movies and for books. And I had actually watched the movie first, and I'm glad I did, because even though it's so different, I'm glad that I finished with the book, because it was better. The books are often better, everyone knows that. This is one of those cases, but I don't think that enjoying the book so much stopped me enjoying the movie. They're such different stories. Don't think, well, I've watched the film, I won't read the book, because it is so different. So much has been adapted, and I think it's been adapted really well for screen. There are scenes that just, in this, that wouldn't be very action-packed in a film, but in this, they're really well written. And I think it's just, if you love the 80s, this is such a love letter to it. And I think the characters are really great. The film does feature more of the side characters, but I like learning the different view on them in the book. They're talked about in different ways, they have slightly different personalities, and I think I preferred them in the book. There is a sequel, but I've heard some questionable things about it, so I haven't read it. I'm not sure if... There is a sequel, but I've heard some questionable things about it, so I'm not sure yet if I'm going to read it. But I think if it did, it couldn't ruin this book for me, because it was really enjoyable, and I love the film too. I rewatched the film, I might reread the book. They're both great in their own ways. The next book is Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas, a Book Talk book everyone knows about. I actually did it as a buddy read with a friend from Book Talk, and so I've tabbed it at certain points. But this one was such a good surprise, because it's one of the ones that I wasn't sure would live up to the hype, because I'd heard so many things about it, but it definitely did. It's about Yadriel, who his family struggle to accept his gender, and he wants to prove himself. It's all set on Day of the Dead. He tries to summon a ghost, he summons a different ghost, and they end up working together to kind of solve a mystery. The setting is brilliant. It's really fast paced. It only takes place over a short time, but it fills up the whole book really easily. Again, gorgeous cover. You can see a theme. All the books I seem to have picked have amazing covers. The relationships in the book are really lovely. Obviously, there are some things that get in the way, but I just love seeing all the characters interact. Often with fantasy, it's really plot driven, and the characters can lack a little, but I did not find that at all. I don't think there was a single character that I didn't absolutely find amazing. And I really enjoyed this one as a buddy read, so if you do have someone else that wants to read this book, I 100% recommend doing it like that, because it's so great to kind of talk about it at different points, and because it's a mystery you can have your own theories about things. I wish more than anything that I had my physical copy of Six Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim to show you, because it is the most gorgeous cover ever that I think I've ever owned. But it's at university, but this is definitely my favourite fantasy read of the year. And not just because it's absolutely beautiful, but because the mix of fairy tale and culture, characters, magic is amazing. And I'm so annoyed that it's a duology because I have to wait for the sequel. But it had such this amazing concept of family throughout. And there are a lot of books on Book Talk about found family, but I don't see many fantasy books with relationships explored with mothers and siblings as much as this does. I thought it was really beautifully written prose-wise, but also the plot was, for me, perfectly paced. But I read it so quickly because I just couldn't put it down. I think I read it in 2 nights. Everyone I've talked to also loves this book. The highlight of my year was Elizabeth Lim following me on TikTok, because that just absolutely made my whole year, to know that she knows I love her book. And The Dragon's Promise, the sequel, does come out this year, so I'm extremely excited for that. But Shiori is one of my favourite main characters. The villains aren't always who you think they are in this book, and I love that about it. The ending was emotional. The magic system was just beautiful. The side characters, the little origami crane that she magics into reality is so lovely. I just cannot recommend this enough. I've been joined by a tiny friend. The next book on my list had a real effect on me, and I was lucky enough to get an arc of it. I've probably talked about it so much on my book talk that you've probably seen it, and it is Vampires, Hearts and Other Dead Things by Margie Fuston. It is a book about a girl who, her dad is dying with cancer, and in a final attempt to save him, she goes to New Orleans in search of a vampire to save him from this illness. I'm very close with my dad, so hearing about her relationship with her dad, the things that they share, their love of vampires, it reminded me of the things that me and my dad share with each other as well. Some of it really pulled at my heart. There is a letter at a certain point in the book that I just bawled my eyes out. I mean, I probably cried multiple times throughout reading the book. I had to keep putting it down and crying so my tears didn't stain the pages, but it was all worth it. The best friend character, he is really great. So is the vampire in the book. It explores more about vampires than just the stereotypes that you know and the pop culture references, although there are those as well. It talks about the legends. There's a fun kind of treasure hunt that she does in the book. It's fun, it's emotional, it's deeper than I thought for a YA fantasy, but not really dark. And I think for lovers of vampires, I think it's the perfect book. We are now on to the very last book, which I read at the beginning of this month, and it is The Love and Lies of Roxanne Ali by Sabina Khan. And I was gifted this by my lovely friend Liam on Book Talk, and he told me it was going to crush my heart and then rebuild it again, and it did just that. This book is about a girl from Bangladesh living in America trying to hide lots of secrets from her family, including her girlfriend. And when secrets come out, she is taken to Bangladesh, a world of tradition and arranged marriages, and she is struggling to help people at home understand, trying to work out her own feelings, her own path in life, whilst also trying to make and help her family understand her feelings and about how culture can be different in different places, while still trying to remember her own culture. And it is definitely an eye-opening book, and I just couldn't stop reading this. I got angry at times, I got sad at times, lots of it was beautiful and happy. I loved the friendships in this, the relationships. There were some harder to read about parts, but it was the easiest 5 stars I've given in a long while, and if you like contemporary romance and fiction, I definitely think you should give this one a go. So that is my wrap up of my favourite 10 books of the year. Obviously there were so many more that I absolutely loved, but I can't fit them all into one video, so if you want to see any of them, I'm sure I will have mentioned them on my Instagram or my book talk somewhere, so if you want to find that, that's down below. I would absolutely love if any of you want to comment your favourite reads of 2021 in the comments. I'd love to see what they were and steal some of the recommendations from my 2022 reading list. But I hope everyone has an absolutely amazing new year and has a good reading start to the year as well. Bye!